My father underwent major heart surgery at a hospital outside Cleveland. The operation went well, but recovery required several days of monitoring. Because of that, family members took turns staying with him. Most nights, that responsibility fell to me. I usually arrived around 7 p.m. and stayed until visiting hours ended. Sometimes later. The nursing staff got to know me pretty quickly. The routine became familiar, predictable, comforting, at least initially. The first time I noticed the man was during my second evening at the hospital. Around 9 p.m., I walked to a vending machine near the main waiting area. The place was mostly empty. A few visitors, a couple of nurses, nothing unusual. The man sat alone near the corner, middle-aged, dark jacket, reading a newspaper. I barely paid attention. Hospitals are full of visitors. No big deal. The next evening, however, I saw him again. Only this time he wasn't near the vending machines. He sat outside the ICU several floors away. Same jacket, same newspaper, same person. I remember thinking it was a strange coincidence. Then I forgot about it. Over the next several days, the sightings continued. Different floors, different waiting rooms, different hallways. Always the same man. Always alone. Always reading. The pattern became difficult to ignore. Because hospitals are large, huge. Yet somehow he always appeared nearby. One night, I finally asked a nurse if she knew him. The nurse looked confused, then shook her head. She assumed he was visiting a patient. Honestly, so did I. At least until I started paying attention. The following evening, I decided to test something. Instead of taking my usual route to my father's room, I used a different elevator. Different hallway. Different entrance. The detour added several minutes. When I arrived, the man was already there, sitting outside the cardiac unit, reading, waiting. My stomach tightened immediately, because there was no reason he should have been there. Not specifically, not repeatedly. Still, I tried to stay rational. Hospitals are busy. Coincidences happen. People move around. Nothing more. Then something happened that changed everything. Around midnight, I left my father's room to grab coffee. The hallway was empty, almost silent. As I approached the elevators, I noticed the man standing nearby. For the first time, he wasn't reading. He wasn't sitting. He was watching me. The moment our eyes met, he smiled. Not warmly, not aggressively, just enough to make me uncomfortable. Then he stepped into an elevator and disappeared. The interaction lasted only a few seconds, yet it bothered me the entire night. Because something about the smile felt deliberate, like he recognized me, like he'd been expecting me to notice him. The next day, my father was transferred to another floor. Different unit, different wing, a completely different section of the hospital. I felt relieved. The change somehow made the situation feel over. Then I stepped off the elevator and saw him. The man sat directly outside the new waiting area, reading the same newspaper. My stomach dropped instantly, because now coincidence felt impossible. That evening, I reported my concerns to hospital security. Not because the man had threatened me, because the pattern felt wrong. Security agreed to review visitor records. What they discovered surprised everyone. There was no patient associated with the man. No visitor pass. No sign in records. Nothing. According to hospital records, he wasn't registered anywhere in the building. The following night, security officers approached him. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Then the man left. Problem solved. Or so I thought. 2 days later, I returned to visit my father one final time before discharge. As I entered the parking garage, I noticed someone sitting inside a parked vehicle, reading a newspaper. The same man. He wasn't looking at the hospital. He was looking at me. I immediately informed security again. This time officers searched the garage, but the vehicle was gone before they arrived. Investigators never determined who he was, or why he kept appearing near different units, or why he seemed interested in me specifically. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe. But one detail still bothers me, because every time I saw him, the newspaper was folded to the exact same page, and in all those encounters, I never once saw him turn it. The woman arrived every night at exactly 8:17 p.m. Not 8:15, not 8:20, exactly 8:17. She'd step off the elevator, walk down the same hallway, enter the same hospital room, stay for roughly an hour, then leave. The routine never changed. The problem was, there wasn't supposed to be anyone in that room. This happened in 2022. At the time, I was spending nearly every evening at a hospital outside Portland, Oregon. My older brother had been seriously injured in a construction accident. Fortunately, he was expected to recover. But recovery took time. A lot of time. For nearly 3 weeks, I visited the hospital almost every day. By the second week, I knew the layout better than some visitors knew their own neighborhoods. The nurses recognized me. The security guards recognized me. The routine became familiar. That's why I started noticing things other people probably ignored. Like the woman. The first time I saw her, she seemed completely ordinary. Late 30s. Dark coat. Shoulder bag. Nothing unusual. She exited the elevator around 8:17 p.m. and disappeared into room 512. I didn't think twice about it. Hospitals are full of visitors. People come and go constantly. No big deal. The next evening, however, she appeared again. Same clothing. Same elevator. Same time. Same room. Again, I barely paid attention. Then it happened a third time. And a fourth. And a fifth. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. Because routines stand out in hospitals. Especially precise ones. Every single night, she followed the exact same pattern. Arrive. Enter room 512. Leave roughly an hour later. No variation. None. One evening I casually asked a nurse whether a long-term patient occupied room 512. The nurse looked confused, then checked her chart. According to hospital records, room 512 was empty. My stomach tightened immediately, because I knew I'd seen the woman enter. Repeatedly. At first, I assumed the nurse was mistaken. Hospitals are busy. Mistakes happen. But the following night I checked for myself. The woman arrived, walked directly to room 512. Opened the door. Entered. Exactly as before. 10 minutes later, I walked past the room. The door remained closed. The hallway remained quiet. Nothing unusual. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about what the nurse had said. Eventually I peeked through the small window built into the door, and immediately felt confused, because the room looked empty. No patient. No visitor. Nobody. The bed sat neatly made. The lights remained off. Nothing moved. Nothing made noise. Yet I had literally watched the woman enter. I stepped away quickly, trying to convince myself I was missing something. Maybe another exit. Maybe a connecting room. Something logical. Anything logical. The following evening, I decided to observe more carefully. At 8:17 p.m., the woman arrived again. Same routine. Same room. This time I waited near the hallway, watching. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. No one exited. No staff entered. Nothing. Then around 9:20 p.m., the door opened. The woman emerged. And for the first time, I noticed something strange. She looked upset. Not crying, but emotionally exhausted. The way people look after receiving bad news. She walked past me without speaking, then disappeared into the elevator. The pattern continued for another week. And honestly, it started bothering me more than my brother's recovery, because nothing about the situation made sense. Then one evening, I finally asked her. The opportunity happened by accident. The woman exited room 512 as usual. I happened to be standing nearby. Before I could talk myself out of it, I spoke. "Excuse me, are you visiting someone in there?" The woman stopped, looked at me, and for several seconds said nothing. Then she answered, "My husband." Simple, direct, normal, except for one problem. The room was empty. I asked whether her husband had recently been transferred. The woman's expression immediately changed. Confusion, then concern. "No." She pointed toward room 512. "He's been there for months." My blood ran cold, because I knew that wasn't true. The woman eventually left, and I stood there trying to process the conversation. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. The next morning, curiosity overwhelmed me. I asked a different nurse about room 512. This time, the answer shocked me. Apparently, a patient had occupied that room several months earlier. A man involved in a severe traffic accident. He'd remained hospitalized for weeks before eventually passing away. The patient was married. My stomach dropped immediately, because suddenly the woman had an explanation. A terrible explanation, but an explanation. Still, it didn't explain why she continued entering an empty room. Night after night, month after month. A few days later, I witnessed something that disturbed me even more. The woman arrived as usual. 8:17 p.m. She entered room 512. Everything normal. Then a nurse approached the room roughly 30 minutes later. The nurse opened the door, stepped inside, then immediately stepped back out, looking confused. The woman wasn't there, at least according to the nurse. I watched the entire interaction from down the hallway. The nurse searched nearby rooms, nearby hallways, nearby waiting areas. Nothing. Then around 9:20 p.m., the woman exited room 512 exactly as she always did, walking directly past the same nurse. The nurse never reacted, never acknowledged her. Nothing. That moment genuinely unsettled me, because I couldn't understand it at all. Eventually my brother recovered. Life moved forward. My hospital visits ended, and the mystery remained unsolved. Months later, however, I returned to the hospital for an unrelated appointment. As I waited near the elevators, I saw a familiar face. One of the nurses. We started talking. Eventually I asked about room 512. The nurse immediately sighed, then smiled uneasily. Apparently I wasn't the only person who'd noticed the woman. Visitors had reported her for years. Not months. Years. Always the same description. Always the same time. Always the same room. Nobody ever identified her. Nobody ever figured out who she was. And according to hospital staff, security never successfully located her after reports were filed. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe a misunderstanding. Maybe multiple people mistakenly connected unrelated events. That's certainly possible. But there's one detail I still can't explain. The husband she described. The patient who once occupied room 512. His death occurred on August 17th. And every single evening, the woman arrived at exactly 8:17 p.m. The first time I saw him, he was sitting in a waiting room. The second time, he was standing near an ICU entrance. The third time, he was outside my mother's hospital room. And that's when I decided to follow him. Looking back, that was probably the worst decision I've ever made. Because what I found inside that stairwell changed the way I look at hospitals forever. This happened in 2021. My mother was hospitalized after complications from a surgery. Thankfully, she was expected to recover. But recovery required several weeks of observation. During that time, I spent almost every evening at the hospital. Sometimes I'd stay until midnight. Sometimes later. Eventually the building became familiar. The hallways, the elevators, the waiting rooms, everything. Which is why I noticed the man. The first sighting happened during my second week there. Around 9 p.m., I walked to a vending machine near the cardiac unit. A man sat nearby reading a magazine. Nothing unusual. Middle-aged. Gray jacket. Short beard. Average appearance. The kind of person you'd forget immediately. And honestly, I did. At least for a while. Then I saw him again. 2 nights later. Different floor. Different waiting room. Same man. Same gray jacket. Same magazine. The coincidence felt strange, but not alarming. Hospitals are large. People move around. No big deal. Then it happened again. And again. And again. Within a week, I'd seen him on 4 different floors. Always alone. Always sitting. Always watching people. Never speaking. Never visiting patients. At least not that I could tell. One evening I mentioned him to my sister. She immediately knew who I meant. Apparently she'd noticed him too. That answer made me uncomfortable. Because now I knew it wasn't just me. The following night, things escalated. Around 10 p.m., I stepped out of my mother's room to grab coffee. As I rounded a hallway corner, I nearly collided with the man. For the first time, he wasn't sitting. He wasn't reading. He was standing directly outside my mother's room, looking through the small window in the door. The sight stopped me instantly, because there was absolutely no reason for him to be there. None. The moment he noticed me, he walked away. Not quickly, not nervously, just calmly, toward a nearby stairwell. Something about the interaction felt wrong. Very wrong. And for reasons I still can't fully explain. I followed him. The stairwell door closed behind him. I entered a few seconds later. The stairwell appeared empty. Completely empty. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing. I remember feeling confused. Because there was nowhere he could have gone. The stairwell connected multiple floors, sure. But not enough time had passed. I should have seen him. Then I heard something. A door closing below me. I immediately started descending. 1 floor. 2 floors. 3 floors. The sound seemed to move ahead of me. Always just out of sight. Always 1 level lower. Eventually I reached a floor marked authorized personnel only. The stairwell door stood slightly open. My stomach tightened immediately, because visitors weren't allowed there. For several seconds, I debated turning around. Then curiosity won. I pushed the door open. The hallway beyond looked abandoned. Not literally abandoned, just unused. Dim lights, storage rooms, maintenance areas. No patients, no visitors, no staff, nothing. The silence felt unsettling. Then I saw him, far down the corridor, walking away. I followed, keeping my distance, trying not to be noticed. The man eventually turned a corner. I followed moments later, and stopped immediately, because the hallway ended. No doors, no intersections, no exits, nothing. Yet the man was gone, completely gone. For several seconds I simply stood there, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then I noticed a door, a narrow maintenance door built into the wall. Barely visible, almost hidden. The door stood slightly open. Every instinct told me to leave. Instead, I looked inside. The room beyond wasn't a maintenance room. At least not anymore. Someone had been living there. Blankets, food containers, water bottles, batteries, flashlights, everything necessary for long-term occupancy. My stomach dropped instantly, because whoever used the room had clearly spent significant time there. Weeks, possibly months. Then I found the notebooks. Several notebooks stacked neatly in a corner. I opened one, and immediately wished I hadn't. The pages contained observations, names, descriptions, schedules, patient information, visitor routines, staff routines, dozens, maybe hundreds. The level of detail was disturbing. Then I found my name. My blood ran cold, because someone had documented nearly every visit I'd made. Arrival times, departure times, conversations, the floor my mother occupied, everything. I closed the notebook immediately, and called security. The response was massive. Hospital security, local police, investigators. Everyone arrived. The hidden room was secured. The notebooks were collected. The entire area became a crime scene. According to investigators, someone had been secretly using maintenance corridors and restricted spaces throughout the hospital for months, possibly longer, monitoring staff, monitoring visitors, watching, recording, observing. The discovery shocked everyone, especially because nobody knew who was responsible. The gray-jacketed man vanished completely. No identification, no visitor records, no security footage clearly showing his face. Nothing. At least initially. Weeks later, investigators finally made progress. After reviewing months of surveillance footage, they identified a former contractor who once worked on portions of the building. Someone familiar with maintenance routes. Someone familiar with restricted access points. Someone who knew how to avoid attention. The suspect was eventually located and arrested. And thankfully, the story should end there. But there's one detail I still think about. Among all the notes investigators recovered, one entry stood out, because it wasn't about schedules, or routines, or observations. It was about me. The final sentence beneath my name read, "He noticed me tonight." The note was dated the same evening I followed him, meaning while I believed I was secretly watching him, he already knew I was there. To this day, that realization bothers me more than anything else. Because for weeks I thought I was occasionally seeing a stranger in a hospital. The truth was much worse. He wasn't occasionally seeing me. He was studying me,